Welcome to Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast. Just a couple of average police chiefs.
I would say above average, but I guess it depends who you ask.
I appreciate that. Just a couple police chiefs, above average apparently, who decided to get together and share with the world our experiences as police chiefs. So this is our first episode. We have no idea what we're doing, and here we are. So with that, Mike, why don't you just take a few minutes here and tell the listeners who you are and how we got to this Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. I'm Chief Mike Hawkins. I work in a suburb of Detroit, Southeast Michigan. Smaller agency, 35 sworn. I've been with the department here for 24 years in all roles, from patrolman, corporal, sergeant, lieutenant to chief. Been a canine officer, supervised a DB, supervised pretty much everything here in the department. Love it. Born and raised in the town I'm in. Outside of police work, I like to coach, golf. Served on our local school board for 13 years, which was which was quite a treat. But I think you leave things better than they started. That I think that's a positive. But
I think being a school board member would be worse than being a.
It's quite possible, and we'll get into that maybe later when we talk about some SROs and we talk about some school responses in some later episodes.
Nice.
Born and raised, my family here in town, love it, love every aspect of the city and the department I'm with. Was fortunate to meet you at FBI National Academy, the class 291.
The best class.
Yeah, where we met. Been staff and command for executive leadership in the past. From Siena Heights University way back in 1999, which was in criminal justice. Done a lot of community involvement, civic involvement, and excited to kick off this podcast with you. Well, Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty boring. I started in law enforcement in the mid '90s. I am from Ohio, so I think it's important for our listeners to understand right now that you're from the state up north called
you can
Michigan.
See that picture right there in the corner there.
Yeah, so this is going to be fun because you're from Michigan, which my Ohio listeners are going to be very upset that I even said that word out loud. I'm from Ohio. You're from up north. And for those that don't know, there is a huge rivalry between these football teams that has been in existence for eternity. And as of right now in 2025, you have been what we would call put a whooping on us those last several years. However,
4 years actually, yeah.
However, at the end of the day, we did win the national championship, so we're gonna hang our hats on that. And let's move on. So I started in the mid '90s. Here in Ohio, you can put yourself through the police academy, and most of these are set up through community colleges or universities or whatnot. And you go to the academy, and once you graduate the academy, then you get what they call qualified to take the state test. So you take the state test, and then you become certified. And now you got to go out and find a department to hire you. So for me, back in the day, we would try to get just a part-time job somewhere, right? Part-time auxiliary, just you wanted somebody to hold your commission. That was the goal. So for me, I found a job in a really small town, 1 square mile, nothing ever happens here kind of town. And I was there for about 3 years when a job opened up at a larger agency, about a 50, 60 officer department. And I spent about 16 and a half years there. I rose through the ranks. At the time, I was the youngest sergeant ever promoted in the agency, which was pretty cool. I was a traffic officer in our Explorer program. I was an FTO in our street crimes team for about 4 years. The best job ever to date, by the way. In 2014, 2015, we'll talk about this in an upcoming episode, but I had something that happened to me in my career, which was I realized I was approaching the ceiling. And I knew I needed to do something for career advancement. I ended up leaving that agency to become an assistant chief of police in a city near Dayton, Ohio. I was only there for a short time when the chief's job opened up in the community that I lived in 2016. And I've lived in that community since 2003. So when the opportunity presented itself to leave to go join this agency where I'm currently at now, I jumped on it. And I thought there's no way in heck they're going to hire me. This is one of the fastest growing suburbs in the state. It's going to be a highly sought after job. Everybody's going to want this position. And be careful what you wish for, Mike, because you just might get it. So I'm in my 9th year now as the police chief here, and I'm having a blast. I got a phenomenal staff. We're going to talk about culture, morale, and elevating your agency and doing things as a leader to make your department the best it can be. And I can't wait to share the experience experiences that I've had in the last 9 years as a police chief and educate hopefully some of our listeners. Because I know we're going to have people who are either current chiefs or a lot of folks that might be aspiring to become a police chief. And you and I, as you said, we met in the FBI National Academy, Class 291, and we got to have a lot of conversations over those 10 weeks. And what I think we both realized was that um, police departments, it doesn't matter what size, doesn't matter what state, doesn't matter county, local, it doesn't matter. We're all going through similar issues.
All the same problems, right? Yep.
Yeah. In fact, I always say same stuff, different patch. I get to teach for one of the country's largest law enforcement training companies. So I get to fly about once a month, going somewhere in the state. I've been from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine. And when I travel around the country speaking, I always say, same stuff, different patch, because really the issues, they're all the same. So anyhow, we'll get more to that later on. This is obviously our first podcast. And I said in the intro, we have got no idea what we're doing. We're winging this thing, but we both felt like this was something that we needed to get out, the message about leadership and about being a new police chief, what you think the job is as opposed to kind of like what it really is. So we thought, well, what better way to kind of kick off episode one than to talk about what is it about this job that you as a police chief now wish kind of someone had told you, that's not, one of the things that we all hear about, right? Like we all hear, oh, it's lonely at the top and there's going to be a lot of stress. You're going to have to deal with politicians. You're going to deal with community members. And yeah, like we get that, right? But like, what's that one thing, Mike, that you wish, man, I wish somebody had, maybe if they told me this, maybe I wish they gave me like more information on that might have helped me in the early days. So what,
Well,
what, what do you think that is?
I think there's a few things, right, Scott? And you touched on it really in the beginning. Every problem that I have here, somebody else has in a different agency. And whether you have thousands of officers, whether you have 8 officers or 60, it doesn't matter. And I think at the FBI Academy, National Academy, that's when I kind of learned, wow, I'm not alone in this, right? And I think that's why maybe we, talked about getting this podcast is letting people know you're not alone. Everything that we're going through, everybody else is going through and maybe through experiences and conversation, if we can help one person or at least let them know that this is normal, I think that is a huge step. When I first got the job, I remember being up, go to bed about 11:30, 12. I'd wake up at 2:30, 3 o'clock. I would get up and come into work because I couldn't sleep. I had so much on my mind. I had a list of things that I needed to accomplish, needed to fix, and I wasn't getting the sleep. My work life balance was out of whack. Not that it's great right now, right? But I didn't sleep. I didn't do anything other than focus on the job and the task. And we were going light speed, fixing things,
Well, Mike, real quick,
buying.
just sorry. So just so our folks know, so you came from inside the
Yes,
organization, right?
yes,
So
I did. So I
yeah,
came with
so that
within 24
that's a
years
different
here.
that I'm sorry, that's a whole different that's all that, like people need to know, like that's a whole different arrangement, right? Because you
And everybody says it's easier to come from the outside, right? Because when you come from inside, the same people you were working with on the road years ago and the way you did things and, policing has changed quite a bit over the years are not things that maybe are acceptable now or there's different rules, different changes. So it
these are your
is,
buddies. These are
yeah,
your
these are your
buddies.
friends. So, in our department 35, when I started, there were 52. That's how much it's changed. But
Oh wow. Wow.
there's people that are in your weddings. There's people that, godfathers of your kids. And now all of a sudden you have to hold them accountable. And you talked about the simple thing is, yeah, it's lonely up top, right? I say all the time, you could have a party in a phone booth when you become chief, right? Because as you move up patrolman, you have all kinds of friends, all kinds of buddies, organizing the golf trips, right? As corporal, as sergeant, which I think sergeant is road sergeant is one of the best jobs in the police department. You're the most effective, I think, there. Lieutenant, you lose a little bit. When I became chief, my goodness, right? You're sitting there, and I'm born and raised in this town, and your friends and your confidence become less inside the department and more outside in the community. What about you? What do you think when you first started?
Well, I tell you, it's interesting for me. I came from the outside. I knew some of the folks that worked there because I had been teaching in a couple of the regional police academies for years. So I had instructed several of the officers in the academy, and I've like I told you before, I moved out here in 2003. So what is that, 13 years or ish? I
Wow.
had lived here before I became the chief. I knew about the community. I knew about the challenges that they were having, with the growth and this, that, and the other. But I didn't really know the inner workings, even though I thought I had a pretty good grasp on it just from knowing people and being around. You just don't know what you don't know. So, you
Well,
know,
you're not kidding. So I remember as a young officer, I was our union president for years, and we had an outside chief come in, and I remember the battles that we would have in the fights, and I thought, who knew better than me, right? With 5, 6, 7 years on, 8 years on, and we would battle. And I finally, when I got to this seat, and it's been 2 years here, I thought to myself, man, was I wrong, right? I called him up and I said, hey, I'm sorry. I see now what you were trying to do and why you were trying to do it. I just didn't have that sight that you had from the high top corner office that, that you were trying to fix the department, make it better. And yeah, I called and apologized because he deserved that from me from back in the day.
well, yeah, it used to be that, union forever, administration never, right? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, poof, now you're part of the admin, and you see
Yeah,
things.
and not only so I was our union president here locally, and then sat on the board for the Michigan Association of Police, as well as the president of the statewide organization for several years. Not only was I involved in our contracts when there were any, you know, grievances that we had to sit on a board to decide, I'd sit on those for other departments. Yeah, but I tell you what, that helped me a ton coming into this role, having that background of understanding the contract, really, really writing some of the contracts for so many years. When you want to change, you understand the background of where we came from and why we're in that place. So
Well,
I
it
thought that was
certainly
helpful.
gives you a different perspective. In fact, when people ask me around the country, you're like, hey, what would you recommend I do if I want to become a chief, or what can I do in my career now if I want to become a police chief? And I always say, like, be a union rep, because how much of being a police chief now, for those of you that are dealing with unions or contracts, knowing the inner workings of that undoubtedly makes you a better leader now, because you know that language, you know the ins and outs of, like you said, into those contracts, and why certain decisions are made. It just gives you better perspective, whether it's
Yeah. I think
budgeting.
when the union comes and says, "Hey, why are we doing this?" That's been a rule forever. We don't know that, and maybe some younger guys. I can tell you why it's a rule. I can tell you the person is probably a rule from 15, 20 years ago, but maybe a little bit of experience into why that's in the contract, or maybe why it's been turned into a policy as well. Because all policies have or somebody's name
Right.
unofficially attached to them.
Everybody looks through their policy manual and put a name to certain policies. So, and that'll be another episode, is not leading through hand grenade management. Right? We don't punish everybody because of one person, but that'll
No,
be.
and I think that that's a big thing, and I've made a ton of mistakes. 2 years, right, coming in, and we've got outstanding people in our agency, and I'm sure you do as well. But there were some changes that we had to make that weren't easy, and maybe sometimes going too fast. And you had that approach where we have this much to change. Do we do it all at once and then suffer a little bit and then it gets better? Or do we keep peeling that band-aid off? See, I'm not a person who likes to keep peeling, because sooner or later somebody say, rip the damn thing off, right?
Right.
But I've made some mistakes. And I think as a chief, owning those mistakes and letting people know that you made that mistake and fixing it, that's one of the most important things. Because I've seen good leaders, I've seen bad leaders, and the ones that won't own the mistake, they really drive the guys crazy on the road. And you lose a lot of credibility that way.
Well, I think you brought up a great point, and that is, showing your human side. I know for me, it's important as a police chief to show your people that, hey, I'm human, right? To this day, if you come to my office, I have behind my desk, in the bottom right hand drawer, I have a folder of many write ups that I got throughout my career, and I use that as an example when I have an officer come in who's upset about, maybe they received some discipline or whatever the case might be, and they're upset about it. I pull that folder out and I show them the write ups that I've gotten throughout my career. And I always,
You're making it sound like a lot.
well, it's It is, the folder is a little thick, but anyhow, yeah, I'll let them thumb through the write ups, and I'll remind them that I'm currently a police chief and I'm a national instructor and I'm an expert witness and I'm own my own, consulting company, and we're doing podcasts and things. It's like, and I do that because I don't want them to be defined by that moment. So it shows the human side, right? I mean, I could have taken that write up that I got for backing the police cruiser up and hitting the telephone pole and let it just completely derail me or throw me off, And I don't know that I'd be sitting here today if I allowed Scott's definition to be defined by a write up. So, anyhow, that.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you. I teach the problem employee and the discipline process at Staff and Command, and I lead off with a Mike Hawkins 2004 discipline, right? This is me. Even you can be a police chief one day, right? But I think everybody makes mistakes. Owning the mistake and moving on is the biggest thing, right? You don't really get in trouble for the mistake you made. You get in trouble for the cover up or not fessing up. I think that's the problem. So you own it, move on, and live another day.
So, one thing that I'm hearing is the importance of communication. Just, we're not talking written communication, we're talking verbal, and the importance of being a good communicator. Whether it's talking with folks about, you brought up the union and explaining why you do certain things, or it's me explaining a write up. One topic that I really want to get in one of these episodes is the issue with training and how we're kind of training cops and some of the lost skill sets that are out there. And one of those, I think, is communication. As a police chief, how important is communication?
So I still remember my interview, right? Communication and cooperation. And I remember those. So I love reading in John O'Neill, who was the old FBI supervisor in New York, 9/11. Great book. Looming Tower was based on him. Jeff Daniels plays him. It's an outstanding series. But I read his book, The Man Who Tried to Warn America. And his one big thing was communication and cooperation. And I try and use that and remember that everywhere. You cannot over communicate. And there's times that I have failed as we're going so fast to do it like I want to, because you got to understand it's not just what I say. I have to make sure they understand, because I can communicate it all the time. But if you're not understanding in receiving what we're saying, then I didn't do a very good job of communicating. I think that, being from town and being involved in the school board, my dad he was a Parks and Rec director here in town forever. He was involved in that. So the communication and cooperation with outside stakeholders, I'd been involved in that since I was young. But as you move up, it's the communication to the guys that you were just sitting with a couple of years earlier in a squad car on a call, but it's the communication as to why we're doing this, especially when it's something different. That is the most important thing in making sure that they understand why. And I know it's a quasi-military organization, right? You do what somebody says, but the generations are different. They want to know why, and if they know why, they're going to do more.
100%. In fact, when I became chief, one of the first things I did, and this was taught to me as a sergeant, for those of you out there that are aspiring or you are a chief and you're not doing this, this can be your takeaway from this episode, and that is I met with every employee, and it took me a couple months to probably sit down with every employee, all the shifts, all the divisions. And I asked them basically, 4 or 5 questions. What do you like about this place? What would you change? If you were me, what's the first thing you would do? What would you keep the same? And if you had an unlimited budget or resources, like what would you fix or buy right away? And what I did was when I interviewed everybody, I just made a list of what they brought up, and I just wrote things down as they were talking. And once I got through every employee, it took a few months to get through every employee. I laid all those sheets out individually, and I took a highlighter and I started highlighting the common things that I was hearing. And the number one issue that was on almost every single person's list had something to do with the word communication. I would hear things like, nobody knows what the hell is going on around here unless you work day shift and you happen to see the chief at the right time. They don't tell us anything. One day we came in and we got new cars and, blah, blah, blah. So I recognized early on in my 10 years as police chief that I had to improve the communication component. And what came from that is essentially sending out a weekly update. And every week, usually on Friday. Now, sometimes I will skip a week if there's nothing going on, but usually every Friday I'll send out a weekly update. And it's literally, Mike, it's just a bullet pointed list of just things going on in the agency, right? Where we are in the hiring process with a certain employee. We bought new cruisers, we're getting new LPRs. We bought the carpet's going to be clean next week. So and so's on vacation. I mean, just whatever's going on. What I found out was by doing those weekly updates, I cut down on so much drama, right? So much. Well, I heard. Well, I heard. Well, I heard. Well, I heard. No, no, no. What I heard was this. It just cut it all out. And
No,
it,
I think that's a great point because when you mention it, the game of telephone, as it goes down to them, it's a completely different story than what you said in your
yep.
office to somebody. So that's a great point.
Everybody is getting the same message from the chief. So what I tell what I tell new chiefs is this, throughout your week, just on a piece of notebook paper as the week goes on, just jot stuff down or open up your Outlook calendar and just save a draft and just start typing things in there, and then on Friday, set a reminder up on your calendar to boom, send that thing out. And it will cut down on so much, again, drama, and everybody will be informed. You mentioned this generation earlier, and that's a whole that'll be another episode. But
That's
the
a whole topic. Yeah.
yeah, the one thing about this generation, I think, really cops in general, is they just want to know what's going on. Yeah, and if you keep them informed, they feel important, they feel valued, and in my opinion, they're going to buy in more to whatever it is that you're trying to do, because you know what? Hey, we're not being kept in the dark. They're transparent, right? Everybody loves transparency, and I think that's really important. So
And your point in meeting with everybody. So when I talked about that one chief who I apologized to, when I finally took over, that was one thing he did. And I remember still to this day sitting in the office and having that conversation. Wow, the chief's going to talk to me, and I was a bottom guy here for 8 years in the department, and so I did the same thing, and I've tried to do it almost on a yearly basis, but it takes a lot of time. And to your point, there was one officer that because of some union stuff, I figured, okay, we had a conversation. And he felt slighted because I didn't have that individual sit down with him until the next time around. I apologize. I thought we had this, but it shows how important that interaction is. And to let somebody get it off their chest, what they want to say, you can say whatever you want in the office, right? Speak freely. And they do. And sometimes, oh man, and look in the mirror once in a while, but there's things that need to be fixed, and there's things that probably need to be toned down as well. And I think that is valuable feedback from them in a one-on-one setting.
Well, and again, you brought up an interesting topic, and that's trust. And we always say that trust is the backbone of all relationships. And if you don't have trust with your people, you're not going to establish those relationships where folks can come into your office and they can have that conversation. The other struggle I see with some police chiefs is their ego, and they can't check their ego. That too is going to harm you in that I don't know everything. A good friend of mine likes to say that he's just a cop with rank, and that really means I think that says a lot. Is hey, look, there's things that, hey, I just happen to be the chief, man. Like, I don't know everything. When chiefs can admit that, I think they can resonate better with their people, or excuse me, they can relate better to their people, because it shows that, look, man, I'm just a human like you, and
And I think it's getting people in the right positions in the right place. And sometimes that takes time. But if you trust them to do their job, and you're pushing that onto somebody else and delegating that, it's the power that more power you give, the more you receive, right? The theory. But yeah, trusting these guys to do their job and to hold people accountable so you don't have to really is ideal for police departments.
nope, you're spot on. Spot on, brother. So let me ask you this. Let's talk relationships, not your like personal relationship, but like at work. Like, if someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, okay, look, you guys talk about communication, you talk about written, nonverbal communication, how important it is to be able to be an effective communicator. When it comes to like relationships in the organization or in your community, who would you say is the most important person to form relationships with early on as a new police chief?
Well, I think there's a handful of people. As a new police chief, you have to have what, in one of my classes at the academy was your board of directors, right? You have to have people in and outside the agency that you can go to and bounce ideas off. And it may be a former chief, it may be an officer that really doesn't have any rank, but has some referent power with the officers on the road. Maybe you spot somebody that could be the next chief in 15, 20 years. There's other stakeholders, but you have to identify a handful of people. And I will tell you this, and I know this is strange, that sometimes the best person or people that I can bounce ideas off of are my 19-year-old and my 16-year-old, because they'll tell me straight how it is. They'll tell me to knock it off. They'll tell me exactly what I should be hearing,
Do you have to
because
have a
they don't know
cheat
the
sheet though?
politics.
But do you have to have a cheat sheet to understand their language? Like
Yeah,
what's
yeah, no, I don't
skibbity?
have them
What's skibbity?
texted to me. I don't know any of
Yeah,
those,
yeah,
those
yeah.
words, but those two are outside of the drama, the politics. Here's this, and they give you a clear picture of what somebody would think that's not involved in, I think that's important. And now whether it's your kids, whether it's a spouse, you know, my wife is always willing to um, give me advice. I just try not to bring the job home too much. But yeah, there's a handful. I have a retired police chief or two that I talked to. My dad, he passed 4 days before I went to the NA, but he was somebody that I would go to, and because he was a department head, he had a lot of ideas, and I could bounce things off of him. But what about you? Who do you think is important to talk to or to form relationships with?
I think all the folks that you mentioned are critical in every organization. I think the other piece there is who in your community are the stakeholders, who in the community who are the unofficial leaders in the community. Again, depending upon the organization, how big your community might be. Your school superintendents, your business owners, the folks, yeah, quote unquote old men sitting around drinking coffee at the local coffee shop every morning at 7 a.m. Right?
Now, how many
Like,
people do you have in your?
so we're about 34,000.
Okay, we're about 19, just under 20,000.
Yeah. So I think it's those folks, those relationships that will one, it helps add credibility to you as the chief, right? And then those folks go out there and they are basically salespeople for you and salespeople for your agency. One topic that I want to talk about at some point down the road is funding and how you here in Ohio, we rely a lot on property taxes. And for a community like ours, the only way that we can, well, not the only reason, but one of the primary ways that we increase revenue is through property taxes. Well, when you go to people and ask for more money, that's a big ask. So, we'll talk in another
Yeah, you
episode.
better be delivering some service on the other end, and nobody wants to pay more.
Right.
We went through a bond here for a new station, which we're in the process of building. We have a 98-year-old building, so we're in the process. It passed, and it was those relationships and the communication, the cooperation with those people. What don't you know as a police chief? It's meeting after meeting. I have meetings to have meetings to have meetings with people to get them on board, and we all have to get
Mhm.
on the same team. Because what we're really trying to do is make our town the safest it can be, and we need the residents, we need the stakeholders. And I just joined the Rotary last week. Great group of people, and it's things like that, so you can reach out and call somebody and let them kind of know what's going on. And I think it's very important.
You know, we have no idea what we're doing, as I've said now 3 or 4 times with this podcast. We have no idea where this podcast is going to go. I suspect when we publish this episode, we're going to have at least 2 viewers, and they're both on the screens here in front of you. Although my mom will probably watch it, and I'm sure my wife will probably watch it, and the kids will watch it. So we may have a handful of viewers. My hope is that this thing will build and build and build and become a resource that folks can turn to. Again, whether you're an aspiring leader or you're a current leader, we want it to be a resource for folks, and we want to have folks on here that specialize in, because I don't know anything really. I always tell people I don't know anything. I just know a lot of people, so I'm not an expert in anything. But anyhow, as we kind of move forward with this podcast, and we bring it, we've already had people reach out. in the short time we've kind of teased this. We've already got special guests that want to be a part of it and want to be, on the show because they understand, hey, everybody has something that they're great at, and people want to hear that message. So as we kind of wrap this thing up here, this first kind of inaugural episode, what do you want folks to know about why they should subscribe to this podcast and they should look forward to the new releases? What topics do you want to see talked about? Who do you want to reach out to as like potential guests? Like, kind of like, what are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, we've got resources not only from the NA, but just through work experiences. And don't fault me here, but a lot of these things we bring people on, it's going to be a learning experience for me as well, right? I'm looking forward to learning more about this or that. There's some good things in community relations, in recruiting, retention, ideas. I'm 5 down right now. Got 2 offers out there, but what are some ideas? We've got to get some more people here. But the leadership topics are great. You can't have enough. There special units, I think, mental health. It's a huge topic, and I will tell you it's one that we have not done a very good job with. And we have been hit in our area with some tragedies from law enforcement, retired law enforcement, and others. And
Yeah.
it's a ticking time bomb, and I don't want it to happen here. So I'm looking forward to maybe getting some people on here that can give us some ideas and some thoughts and share those thoughts with whoever on the best way to offer some resources to the officers.
As we sit here, I just looked out my window. It's dreary and rainy. It's awful here. But as we sit here, just this week, I saw a headline where a county in Texas lost 2, if not 3 officers to suicide. And whenever I read those articles, if those get sent to me, I always just take a pause and reflect on those agencies and what those folks are going through. And I've been on several podcasts and featuring some articles where folks have talked about wellness and mental wellness and physical wellness and all that, and we'll get into that later on. But we absolutely we got to do a better
It's not
job.
just a buzzword anymore.
Right,
It's hitting
right.
close to home,
Yeah.
and something has to be done with it.
Yeah, we definitely have to do a better job with that. And I at my agency we've done some really good things with wellness that I look forward to sharing. I know we've got some folks that are going to get on here and talk about those as well. So here we are. It's 2 Chiefs, 1 Mike, just a couple. I still think I'm average, but
I say above average, but
well, I
it depends
appreciate
who
that.
you ask.
You are from Michigan, so but yeah, well, look, we put this together. We want this to be a place where folks can turn to. I don't want it to be filtered. We're obviously being pretty mellow right now because it's our first time, and again, we just don't know what we don't know yet. But we are looking forward to featuring different folks on this podcast. So if you're interested, we would ask you to drop us a line. Let us know what you want to talk about. You want to get on? Come on, let's do it. We're not making any money off this thing. I'm sitting in my kitchen. You're sitting in your office, and here we are. So,
And we'll put it
Mike,
on more platforms as
yeah,
well. But to start, we used YouTube, and you could see our radio faces here,
yeah,
and we'll
yeah.
go from there.
I think it's funny. We should tell people that when we first talked about this, we had no plans of doing video.
No,
We were just going to do audio because, like you said, we both have faces for radio. And it's funny when folks found out we were going to do this, they were like, "Oh, you need to have a script, and you got to have an editor, and you got to have this, and you got to have that, because that's really going to make it tick." And I'm like, "No, like I just want to just have a conversation. I don't want this to be a big production now." I
Yeah,
say
when you
that
said
right.
raw and unfiltered in the beginning, I mean that's really what it's going to be. You might see some mistakes, you might see some little bit of stuttering, a little bit of mumbling. It's real life and it's live. If we stick to a script, I think it's going to be rigid. Nobody's going to be interested. They'll lose interest real fast.
If they haven't already.
Yeah, that's true. We've been going for quite a while.
All right, brother. Well, hey, not a bad episode number 1. I look forward to the next episode. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel and shoot us an email if you're interested in appearing on the show or have any ideas. Mike, send us home, brother.
Go Blue. We look forward to you next time.
Take care.
Wow.